What's up, BSidesCharm? All right, so I got kept up till 4 o'clock in the morning last night. I feel like I have more energy than all of you. So can we try again? What's up, BSidesCharm? That's much better. How are you all doing today? My name is Shawn. It is Bring Your Boss to Work Day. So I brought my friend Taylor here.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Taylor, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So I have the wonderful, amazing job of being Shawn's boss. It's exhausting.
He's lying.
I don't even know how I have energy this morning, to be honest, taking care of him. But no, in all honesty, Shawn is amazing to work with. We work together at Yahoo. We're with the Paranoids. Before that, I did about 10 years with the FBI doing some counterintelligence type work. It was super secret and super fun. Yeah, I had a good time. But here to talk to y'all today and go over the action group method. Shawn.
Yeah, he also left out, so he is the Director of Threat Detection and Response at Yahoo. I am the Director of Forensics and Incident Response Engineering, lovingly called FIRE internally. Before that, IR consultant, SOC work, a whole bunch of stuff. So we have spent the last couple of years working on what we call the action group model to incident response. And we think it's kind of a cool thing. So we figured, hey, we're going to come talk to a bunch of people about it because it'll be fun.
Yeah, it seems to work okay for us. So hopefully, this might be interesting for you all. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. Take what you can home with you.
Yep. All right, you want to dive right in?
Yeah, let's do it, John. Cool. All right, so we're going to start you off. So this is our general workflow for the action group model. So essentially, this is not terribly different from most other models of incident response. You have sort of an intake section. Hey, how are we actually bringing things into our area? Are we finding detections? Do we have things that are being sent in by our partners? We have to do something with that after we have it, though. This goes into our triage section where we're really asking the basic facts of what's going on. Now, our folks that are in our FIRE area are essentially doing these first two areas. They're receiving things in, they're then asking the basic facts and trying to determine, do we have a problem here? Fundamentally, that's really what we're wondering. And really what we're looking for is there some sort of malicious activity that could be going on? And do we have something that's a big problem? That's what we mean by imminent material compromise that we have up there on the board right now. But if we do have those two things, we go into activating our action group. If we don't have those things, this is our normal BAU stuff. Hey, we've got maybe a phish email or something like that we need to deal with. Doesn't look like there's anything going on, whatever, we can handle that normally. But when we do have something that looks like it could be a big problem, we move into the action group. And this is really the gist of what we want to talk to you all today. This is where we bring in a number of different folks, a number of different partners from all across cybersecurity, human resources, legal, ethics and compliance, physical security, to work on these big major incidents when we do run into them. And this is really important. We'll get into the details of these in a few slides. But as we go through this, we kind of continue on through the general method. We do our response. This is where we're asking what are the key questions that we need to deal with here. And then we go through, set forward those work streams that we have. Afterwards, we go into our closeout. This is our normal lessons learned, post-incident response activities, and things like that. But as we go forward, and as Shawn starts to walk you through all these, I want you to be really careful and be thinking about sort of this action group model, bringing a number of folks together, having these pre-established connections to be able to come in and provide oversight and assign things to a dedicated incident commander that can be really any of the individuals that you're working with. So anybody that's working in a SOC in our area, anybody that's working on our FIRE team can step up and be an incident commander with that guidance of that action group that we have across the organization. You get over you, Shawn.
Yeah, go ahead, jump to the next one. So we'll go through each one a little bit, and something to bear in mind, your mileage will vary. We actually tried to extrapolate our plan out into a much more simplistic concept that can be applicable to your organization. So some of our language is removed, and we kind of open this up a little bit. So like intake. Intake is just how you find stuff. How does stuff come in? Do people tell you about bad stuff? Do you have detections? Do you have threat hunts? Do you have a threat intelligence team? It's ultimately about all of the different processes and feeds that feed into you finding bad stuff, or I should say at this point, investigatable things. It's really important to know your intakes because those are going to tell you what work you have to do. Those are going to tell you what gaps you might have as you look at your intake, so on and so forth. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time here. We'll go right to the next one. So triage. We simplified this one a little bit too. Basically, this is your general SOC, which I kind of hate the term SOC these days. IR, whatever case you want to make, your investigative teams are going to do this, and they're going to start here. So first thing they have to do is kind of ask themselves a very simple question, right? Is this bad? That's really the first question. If it's not, well, you're done. Hey, move on to the next thing. Or, tune it out. There's a whole bunch of other things you can do if it's not bad. But for the sake of the IR process, if it's not, you're good. If it is, then the next question you have to ask yourself, and this is really important, is does this meet the definition of an incident at my company? Your mileage may vary on what an incident is. Some places, every vulnerability that's critical is an incident. Some places, it's not. So your mileage could completely vary, but you have to ask, what is the definition of an incident? And this...
Yeah, I was just going to add in there, Shawn, too. This is something you need to be asking yourself before you actually get into something that might be an incident. We talk about this a lot all the time. This is something that you don't want to be discussing right when you see something bad.
Yes.
So it's going to be really important to jump in there, talk with your folks, talk with your leadership, talk with your partners that you have, and make sure that you understand exactly what that means for your organization. There are lots of definitions of incident out there, but as Shawn was saying, this will highly depend on what your business is doing, what is valuable, what your crown jewels are, what your critical assets are. It's really important to make sure you define that early.
So quick note on IR burnout. A lot of IR teams burn out because they don't have a clearly defined definition of an incident, so everything gets lumped on their shoulders and becomes an incident. That's not where you want to be. You need to define that very early so that you can say, hey, this is when we have an incident process, because incident processes are time-consuming and involve lawyers, which is exhausting. I'm looking at you. Our lawyer is here, so I got to make some jokes. So if it's not, then what we do is we move it into a process where an analyst can handle it. So to use Taylor's early example of a phishing email, if it's one email, low impact, nothing bad happened, right? An analyst can handle that without a whole bunch of people. We don't need to spin up and call in the strike force or whatever words people use these days. All we need to do is just go mitigate that one little issue. It's what we call an event rather than an incident. Now, if it's an incident, that's where we come into the action group concept, and that's really important. So as you'll see as we work through the workflow, you initiate the action group meeting, you set up a comms channel, and you assign an incident commander. And we're going to take some time and dig through those components. So go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about the action group. So we talk about this action group. We've said it a bunch, but like, what actually is this? And really, what we're looking at here and what we're talking about when we mean action group is getting stakeholders in the right place to be able to make operational decisions and to be able to provide the right guidance to the folks that are actually working the incident. So this is really, really important to establish this up front and determine who actually needs to be in the room. And this shouldn't be folks that are up in the C-suite. These should not be executives who are going to say, okay, cybersecurity stuff, bad guy doing something, all right, call the police. Like, not that, right? We need folks who are actually at the decision-making level. They can make tangible decisions on what's going on, but also are close enough to the operational level to understand the ins and outs and the different work streams that you're going to have when you're working one of these incidents. And so typically this action group is going to be making decisions on where you're going, but really establishing work streams. Making sure that these work streams are answering the core investigative goals that you actually have. And so, when we talk about who's actually a member of this action group, like clearly you need the folks that are doing incident response. So for ourselves, Shawn and myself on this, but also you want to have other elements of cybersecurity that are important to have in there as well, such as your intelligence teams that you have, potentially even a red team point of contact, maybe some of your policy folks. This can vary slightly depending on what you need to deal with in your organization, but having the right folks in that room that you can really get answers to most any questions or at least know the right direction to go to is really important.
So one thing that's actually really important about how you structure an action group if you're going to do it, it's split up into what we call responsible parties and support parties. And that is kind of the key, because a lot of people, when they think about an incident, they think about just the responsible parties, right? The IR team is a responsible party. Up to your CISO is arguably a responsible party. But they don't think about support parties. Your detection engineering team, great support party. Your threat intelligence function, great support. Legal, sometimes great. So you really want to look at like who can help with this in some way, shape, or form, because as anybody who's worked in an incident knows, they're all complex, they're all different, especially like big ones. So bringing together a multitude of experience, thought processes, and skill sets is going to get you through that better. And I'll dive into that on like the importance of like variable work streams later, but go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you think about this, we take a practical example, say you've got a corporate account that's been taken over by an adversary or something like that. As you dive into that, yes, you're going to need to deal with sort of the tactical of, okay, how do we evict this actor? How do we actually figure out where this actor is? But oftentimes you're also going to be wondering, okay, what data has been compromised? Could things be out the door? Do we have any regulatory obligations? And having those right folks in the room that really understand how the process works, to be able to give you that counsel really in the moment is incredibly important, because one of the things you really don't want to be doing is when you're dealing with an incident to go, who do we talk to? Who do we actually go to get an answer to this question? Are we under some regulatory obligation? How do we actually get this data? All of these questions may come up during an incident. And I think it's really important to be able to have these relationships pre-established and make sure that they're all in that room. Now, one of the things that you all may be asking and are probably wondering here is, hey, we've got a bunch of cooks in the kitchen now. So we may have these responsible parties or maybe these support parties that we have in our action group too. But how do we actually make decisions? How do we make sure that operational control is maintained? And for that, I'll kick you over to Shawn and the incident commander concept.
Cool. So this probably isn't a super new concept, everybody, but this is something that's super important to talk about across your organization to make sure that it exists, right? The first thing that the action group does before we do anything else is we establish this role of the incident commander. One of the great things about the action group model for us is it makes the incident commander a very accessible role. So it's not just who's the most experienced guy or who is this, because they have a team of people that are there to support, so we can make it a junior. And we often will on different cases and can. It makes it a very accessible model because they have support. It's kind of like being thrown in the ocean but having somebody next to you with a life vest. That's really kind of my whole model of leadership, so.
Seems to work all right.
Yeah,
I don't know. What does the front row say over here? Yes,
front
no?
row? Good? No? Okay. We got one no. It's okay, I can do that. So the other thing that you really gain from the incident commander model, though, is you have somebody who has operational control. That's really important. And that has to be agreed upon at a business level. So when that person, regardless of their rank or title, hits up a VP somewhere and says, I need you to do this, they understand that they need to do that. That is like the most critical thing during an incident. It's also the person who frankly keeps track of things and helps assign out the work streams that we'll talk about in a minute, and all of those other things. Because somebody's got to keep track, keep everybody on task, and make sure that we have the power to handle the thing that we need to handle in that moment.
Yeah, and I it sounds scary in the moment, particularly for junior employees who are going to be an incident commander. Oh my gosh, we've got an adversary that's doing something. We got to deal with them, and I'm the commander. Looking at you, Mark, over there. But I think fundamentally that's why the action group is really important, because you do have the leaders in the room who are tasking out those work streams and understanding what we need to do, and really empowering that incident commander to get done what we have to get done for the incident itself. Also really important to bring in, say, legal counsel with that action group to say like, hey, this is what we can do, this is what we can't do, those sorts of things as well. Just wanted to shout out Bunny Smith, who's down there supporting us and gave us these lovely shirts today.
She did give us these lovely shirts. All right, so this all kind of bleeds into the what happens when we actually do response though, right? So the way we do response and the way that we think about response is this very secular thing. It's also meant to be particularly adaptable. This isn't some playbook that says always go do this, always go do that, always go do this other thing. I mentioned earlier, incidents are different. Different things happen. Different things are affected. There's different ways that you need to approach it. So we put a whole bunch of smart people in a room as the TLDR, and we go...
And Taylor and Shawn.
Yeah,
smart
and
people
us.
Plus Taylor and Shawn.
True. And then we go, what do we need to do? Okay, like we need to know this, we need to know this, we need to know this, we need to know this. We should investigate here, mitigate here, do this, this, and this. We build that out, and then we assign people to it. And we assign across the entire scope of the action group. So we'll go to, if our threat intelligence members on the action group, who from your team is assigned to this thing? Who are you giving us? We need somebody. You have a work stream. You're going to do that. We'll build out this list. And then we assign it, and we get very secular. So the investigation portion happens. That's a little bit kind of out in the wind, but the investigation is going to be different. Could be different logs, could be different servers, could be we need forensics versus we just need network telemetry. Doesn't matter. We do that. And then we come back together as an action group and say, hey, what have we learned? What do we know now? Well, with what we know now we can move back and establish some more work streams because new information means new actions that we can take.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as we think about, hey, different types of attacks that you may see, okay, you've got ransomware, you've got, an account takeover or something like that. You may have SOPs for those things, and that's fantastic, but you're always going to be finding new information during your investigations that you're going to need to be able to pivot through. So, okay, you might have something that means you've got a completely different type of attack, and you won't necessarily have an SOP to be able to account for every single type of attack that you're going to see. So that's why it's important to sort of remain flexible, keep bringing that new information back into the working group. We have the action group, and then making those decisions that come out of the new information that you have.
Also, for anybody here who all here works in IR? Is someone blowing up a helicopter with an arrow not the perfect explanation of what we do? Hat tip to Taylor here for finding the GIF last night, but it is the perfect explanation of this job. All right, let's keep going. So this is the whole model all laid out. We can leave it here for a second if anybody wants to take a snapshot or do any of that kind of stuff. Like, you are more than welcome to. You might be thinking that we haven't yet covered post-incident activities, and we're going to do that with a completely different model in a minute, and we actually have time to do that. Give everybody a minute to take a picture first, and then we'll jump into the second model that we have that is going to be a very brief overview because we have a little bit of time that might be what we come talk to everybody about next time.
Yeah, sounds good.
Go ahead.
Cool, let's go into it. Okay, so everything that we've talked about today is really part of what we call the threat detection and response cycle. So this cycle is really intended to explain everything that we need to do on our side to be able to detect and respond to different threats that are out there. So this is something that Shawn and I have been working through and really trying to understand, okay, so if we take a critical asset in the organization, something like that, we need to be able to do all of these different things. We need to go through each stage, essentially, and be able to cover all of these things and do it well. So for example, the first stage that we have, investigative tool management. This basically means we need some sort of tools to be able to use in our investigation. This could be a SIM, this could be Splunk, whatever, something like that. This could be a number of different things that we absolutely need to have to be able to run our investigation. We then need to develop use cases, and this is a little bit different from detections, but what we're essentially looking at here is, hey, can we establish high-level use cases of what we actually care about for something that's going on? For example, do we actually care about data being lost, something being sabotaged? Do we care about something going to a competitor? These types of things we need to understand, and how that could actually happen is something that we need to establish and talk about. Sort of that next stage, data architecture, hey, we need to have the logs and we need to have the data to be able to discover whatever use case that is. So if we care about data going out the door, how do we actually see that? Do we need some coverage on our endpoints? Do we need application logs? What is it that we actually need to be able to see that? Next stage, pretty self-explanatory. I think everybody gets this, building detections to actually describe those use cases and making sure we have those. Sort of next stage goes into alerting. We kind of separate these a little bit out. So yes, we need to build those detections, but we also need to present that in a way that really makes sense for our analyst. Does it actually elevate to somebody's eyes that are looking at a pane of glass?
Now, that being said, this industry changes all the time. Attacks change all the time. You cannot account for a detection for every single bad thing that happens. Hence, we also include threat hunting in here as a component. As a relatively important part of a program, to be able to respond more quickly than the detection engineering process might take to look for stuff. Now, all of this feeds into all of it, right? Threat hunting feeds into detection. As we continue moving forward and we talk about the incident response and event investigation, that all feeds into detection. That feeds into data architecture. That feeds into everything. But that's basically what we were just walked through. The upfront of this whole talk was basically the workflow for stage 4. Now, what's really important, and this is where we get to the post-incident activity component, mitigation, automation, and control recommendations is one of the most important things that gets overlooked by IR people and investigative people a lot. We see things that happen. We see risks that other people might not see. We then need to take those risks, communicate them in a meaningful way to the business to bring proactive change or close those gaps. If we don't do that, we continue to see the same risks over and over and over again. You want to add on to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that, as Shawn was saying, hey, we can't just live in a silo in incident response. We really have to be able to work with the rest of our partners that are out there, be they in different cybersecurity areas, be it in human resources. Maybe we have issues with something that isn't even technically related, like background investigations or something like that if we're dealing with insider threat type things. So anyway, just wanted to call that out, that this is another place where you can really leverage that action group that you use for operational things now for those sort of mitigation actions and automation that we want to do. You can then, they understand the incidents that you're seeing and can really help you throughout the rest of the organization make those changes, those upstream changes that you need to ensure that you're not seeing too much stuff coming down the pipe on the IR area.
So that's basically the talk. And I have to say, you must be lucky or something, because this is the first time in my life I've given a talk that's like bang on time. Like just dead on the amount of time that we had.
It was all the planning we did for this, right?
Right? Yeah, the 1 hour last night. So that being said, it's also worth saying we don't have like an end slide. We totally have time for questions, I think, right? Yeah, questions? Okay, cool. None of this would have been possible without the conversations that we've had, hell, some I've had with many of y'all who are probably in this audience, the people that we work with every day, except Mark. But none of this would have been possible without them. So we have a lot of people to thank, and we're not going to name them all, but like it's just very important to say that like this is not just us. Like this is a lot of experience and ideas that kind of built into this.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge thank you to all those folks. And this has been, over the course of several years, we've been thinking through this and putting some of these things into practice, and we've found them really helpful. So if there's any elements of this, that you all want to take back to your organizations, please do. At the very least, hope it starts some good conversations about how we can build some partnerships internally, and as well get more folks becoming incident commanders and actually working through these things.
Good finish. So for questions, if possible, or if you can, I would love if people would come up and like I will like come down here. That way they can say something into the mic. If not, you can raise your hand if you're not comfortable doing that. You just have to repeat the question.
Got it.
Hi, question for everyone, for you is that I get this for a 24/7 SOC, but for an action team, what happens if this happens on Saturday or Sunday?
We call the action team.
Yeah, we call the action team. So I think that's something that's really important, and I'm really glad you brought that up, actually, because this action group, particularly that core, the responsible parties in the action group, do need to be available. So we will call people in the middle of the night. We will call legal in the middle of the night if we need to, and we'll wake folks up.
We actually prefer it.
We'll actually save incidents for early Saturday morning, maybe 3 a.m. or so, and then. But no, that's actually a really important part of it, right? You need to be able, especially if you don't have a 24/7 SOC or IR team, to be able to have that action group really at the beck and call of the folks that are working this. That is incredibly important, and you have to have that buy-in ahead of time as well. So it's not always easy convincing folks to be part of this action group, but usually you have some cool examples you can use, and you can sucker people like Bunny into it.
But let's be honest, it extends past the action group, to be completely honest, right? Like, how many IR teams have full mitigation control across every possible bad thing that could happen on their network? Or do you maybe sometimes need to call somebody that doesn't like to pick up on the weekends? Like, that's just part of the job, calling people who don't like to pick up on the weekends. Like, they'll deal. That's why it's so important to have this kind of stuff agreed upon across, like, the higher up leadership of your company, because then they can be mad about it, but they know it might come. What else? Anyway, please. How do you handle the incident commander role going around the globe or around the same lines? I can take that one if you want. So we genuinely try to, like, incident commander is somebody who is there and available and like can do it. We can also hand off that role. It's one of the great things about doing this kind of work. It's not hard to hand off that role and say, hey, you're in charge now. Or you have a team like mine, I'm looking at all of them with disappointment, who just don't leave when things happen and just refuse. And that's on them, not on us.
Yeah, so this actually speaks to the importance of making sure that everyone in your SOC or IR area is really trained to do this and gets the experience. So if folks haven't done this before, hey, get them to tag along in shadow, something like that. You got to make sure that everybody really can step up into that incident commander role because, hey, you may need to be able to transfer something over across the weekend, something like that. Or you may have folks pulled off onto multiple incidents or something, which does happen in the IR world.
The other thing that's worth mentioning is it's really the first couple hours that are critical anyway, because that's when you take your first pass on work streams, you figure out what you want to do, and then people go off and start working, right? So until there's new and damning information, if there is new and damning information, that's when the action group gets back together. And that's when you can figure out the best course of what to do next. So it's very much a like meet, plan, work, meet, plan, work, round and round in a circle. All right, what else? Go ahead, sir. Whoever. All right, Ali, come over.
So it sounds like you guys have put this in effect in the last, year or so? Something like that, a couple of years? So what's the trade-off between the red tape that comes with bureaucracy when you add in all these different teams and their let's just say, ability to rapidly respond to something is different than what IR or security teams usually do. So what's been your trade-off or how you worked through that challenge?
Yeah, so there's a really important component to the action group. Hey, deal with it. There's a really important component to the action group that we talked about earlier, right? That's the responsible parties and support parties. Now I'll let you talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll talk a little bit over Shawn here. But yeah, I think fundamentally, this is why you need to pre-establish the action group and make sure that you have not just a commitment of the responsible parties to actually show up, but to actually get the job done and really make sure they are pushing off the current work that they have. So we have a lot of times where we have legal counsel or someone else who is dealing with other things that are going on. But when we do activate that action group, there's an understanding on all those parties that that is the priority to do right now. So getting that buy-in ahead of time is incredibly important to do. And that's really how we've sort of fought that red tape. Now, it's not always perfect, but generally for those responsible parties that you have, making sure that they understand that, oh, Bunny wants to jump in. This is going to be good.
So one of the pieces I want to add to this is appropriate air cover. One of the red tape killers is having somebody that's got the facility to talk to the rest of them and make them stand down. And that's where you make friends with your HR, your legal counsel, somebody that can give you that air cover. And that's the other piece of the puzzle, because without that, without having the effective partners, you are going to get bogged down in the red tape.
So we had this brilliant plan that we were going to work all this up and we were going to launch a blog post alongside the talk and we were going to do all that. And then we wrote the talk last night and have none of that. That being said, we are planning on doing all of that when this recording goes live. So like we should have companion stuff and like the actual workflows and all that kind of stuff around that time. Presuming that legal approves or I decide not to listen. All right, we probably got time for one more. Anybody? Please. How do we train people and how often do we exercise for the clear roles and responsibilities? You want to take it?
Yeah, all the time. Hopefully we're not putting this into practice all the time. That's a really good way to train folks up. But I think one of the core things, and I think this is something I really want to call Shawn out for doing a really amazing job with, is sort of as we started this, Shawn is a veteran incident commander here. He really took that role of the incident commander and sort of led as the leader in the organization, said, this is how we do this. And so we built a lot of that stuff and modeled a lot of this stuff off of how Shawn has done this. And as he's put some of this stuff into practice, we've brought a lot of the more junior employees along to sort of observe that. And I think there's really nothing better to do than to really understand how this stuff gets put into practice and activated. So that's really one of the ways, is making sure that our junior employees that are here actually see Shawn or really any senior person in your organization put this stuff into practice. The other piece is that, yes, we have the specific processes all documented and outlined internally as well, so that folks understand this and are able to essentially follow along with what the requirements of that role specifically are. In terms of regularly drilling and training, this is something that we do probably not as often as we want to. I think regular drill of this sort of stuff is actually incredibly important. It's just sometimes finding time in an IR shop to do that, which
We find a surprising amount of time, though. Think about tabletop programs and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's quite a bit.
Yeah, so one of the things, speaking of tabletop programs, that we actually think is pretty important to do as well, is to make sure that you have tabletops with your executives using this model or whatever that you have. So when you come up to some of those big time decisions that need to be made during an incident, you do need executive cover for that, as Bunny was talking about earlier, making sure that your executives are roped in as well.
Taylor, they're telling you to shut up.
Yeah, well, I'm getting pulled off the stage. I thought that you were going to play the Oscar music to get me off stage. Was that? No?
You'll have to come up and drag them, trust me.
All right.
All right, thanks
Thanks, folks.
everybody so much. I appreciate it. We'll be around to talk.